You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello, welcome to Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. It is March 23rd, 2023. March 23rd already. Oh my God. And we are here live from the Legacy420.com news desk. We are on the Pace Facebook networks, cbgtv.com, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast locations like, oh my goodness, on the Roku, on Fire Stick. Oh my gosh, I forgot that. How terrible. And as you might have noticed, Glenn looks a little bit different today because, of course, it's Irene and not Glenn. Hi, good morning.
Hello, good morning. Yes, I'm filling in for Glenn today. He's in an area where the signal is not so great. So he, rather than cutting in and out during the broadcast, he said, I'm just going to try it when I get to a better signal.
Yeah, it was either that or get up early and pre-record it. So I think this is much better doing a live show. We might as well jump right into it. Let me close off that window. Of course, I wasn't smart enough to click buttons before I started, but it only takes me a second to get this story up, so we're okay. We're heading over to the first story this morning, coming to us from StratCan. We're finding out that in Ontario, there is a free market for retailers, but not consumption spaces, says Ford.
Yeah, and I was quite surprised by his response. Doug Ford says he doesn't like the idea of cannabis smoking lounges, at least outside. And that was in response to a question during a press conference. Ford initially began by saying he believes the market should decide the fate of cannabis stores, not the government, before pivoting to his dislike of the idea of areas where people can smoke cannabis.
Yeah, I don't like the idea, of having a lounge outside and they're smoking their doobies or their weed or whatever oh, good Lord, they swore, or whatever the hell they call it. Or sorry, whatever the heck they call it nowadays. Some kids walk by and there's all this smell. I don't know. I don't like that. Personally, if you want to do your stuff, do it somewhere else, says Ford. The question was in reference to a recent Ontario Chamber of Commerce, OCC, report sent to Ford calling on him to address the cannabis store clustering and allow cannabis consumption sites. The OCC has been championing many cannabis industry-related issues.
Yes. The Chamber's report supported the idea of cannabis spaces where people can consume cannabis on site, which is similar to smoking areas in certain venues and special occasion permits for concerts, sporting events, etc. Ford shared similar sentiments at a press conference in 2020, saying they're making it legal to go out and smoke a joint, a doobie, a reefer, whatever the heck they call it nowadays, he said, while those in the background chuckled. I wouldn't want my kids walking by with a bunch of guys smoking cannabis or marijuana, but if a couple of guys are sitting there quietly on a picnic bench having a cold little beer, who cares?
Yeah, right. Many of the cannabis community have pushed for similar legislation in different provinces, and a few spaces have emerged here and there. But concerns from different levels of government continue to push back. British Columbia released its own What We Heard consultation report on the possibility of cannabis consumption lounges in January. The results were somewhat predictable. Cannabis consumption and those connected to the industry were generally in favor, while non-cannabis users were against the plan. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Public health and law enforcement, for their part, expressed similar concerns they've had all along with the legalization. Health consequences, keeping it out of the hands of young people, and increased rates of impaired driving. Outdoor consumption has been one of the areas where consumption spaces have made ground in recent years, and many in the industry see opening up cannabis patios and gardens at special events like concerts or festivals to be the most likely first step in relaxing consumption rules.
Yeah. Last summer, several festivals, including the Edmonton Folk Festival, offered smoking areas for cannabis users. In 2021, retail cannabis shop owner Laura Bradley even opened up a dedicated consumption space business in Grand Bend, Ontario. That was awesome. A small beach town on the shores of Lake Huron, called Behind the Bend. It's a standalone patio behind her retail store called The Bend. That permits guests to smoke legally purchased cannabis on site. How did she manage to do so with existing regulations? Very creatively, she said. I follow all the smoke-free Ontario rules, the AGCO rules, the federal rules, she said, admitting, however, that she wasn't 100% confident that the idea would fly. The municipal officials, keen to keep pot smoke off the popular Family Beach just down the road, have quietly approved of the business.
Yeah, so far though, these businesses have mostly been the exceptions that prove the rules, so to speak. Behind the Bend has been able to operate thanks to a unique set of circumstances and loopholes within the regulations, and that's where the creativity comes in, right? Festivals have successfully incorporated smoking gardens by not permitting on-site sales and are likely helped by the existing prevalence of cannabis anyways. But to go from isolated examples to a full-fledged regulated sector is a jump that regulators don't seem keen or ready to make.
There are loopholes, cannabis lawyer Matt Maher told StratCan recently. And by loopholes, I mean there are locations that are suitable and not technically prohibited. It's that ambiguity. Oh, good Lord. Ambiguity, there we go, that allowed something like Behind the Bend to operate successfully, he says. But he also notes that the legal questions around it are far from settled. If we just meet up in the parking lot once a week and smoke a joint, no problem, he said. If you turn that into a business, then the question from the legal perspective is, what's the difference?
So I see what they're saying, but I mean, realistically, yes, we need some consumption lounges.
Oh, absolutely. So many people are being they can't consume in their apartments. So they need a place to go that's comfortable and warm.
Yeah, I mean, when I had the cafe in Penetang, now I was open prior to legalization because I was a medicinal consumption lounge. And much like many of them, I had to close my doors upon legalization, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. But, that's the irony of this business. Moving forward, I had patients that would come in because they had children at home and it was the middle of winter and they were so relieved to have the consumption lounge where they could go take their medication leisurely until they felt, using the vaporizers, and then we're able to say, okay, you know what, I feel better, I'm going home, and the wife can go shopping, because they don't want to consume at home and they don't want to sit out on the balcony in the dead of a blizzard,
No, gosh, no. It's bad enough that they would have to walk to a consumption lounge.
Right. Now, I was fortunate in that I made sure my consumption lounge was right across from an apartment building that was designed for disabled persons and persons who had special needs. I really did pick my location, medically speaking.
Yeah.
Because again, you want them to be able to you want it to be close, because like I say, just having to get there is a challenge enough in some cases, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and a story, we need more consumption lounges in this country, and we need them all over the country, in every corner of the country.
Absolutely. And as per usual, Doug Ford is like a fish out of water, flipping and flopping and not making a whole lot of sense.
Absolutely. But on to our next story. We are heading over to Microsoft Start. New hyper-detailed images of cannabis help researchers find optimal harvest times.
This is really kind of cool. A new highly detailed images that were taken by the Canadian Light Source in Saskatoon are actually going to help cannabis researchers discover optimal harvesting times for the plant. Look at that picture. That's so cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what they're saying is T. Kilicini is leading the research at the National Research Council and calls the images groundbreaking.
The research used the BXDS high energy Wiggler beamline. Well, that's quite a name. And a mid-IR beamline at the Canadian Light Source drinking at the same time, synchrotron, to make highly detailed images of the plant and study its chemical composition. Due to the long prohibition, we have had very limited information and almost no research done on cannabis. It is time we catch up on that to inform the medical community and improve cultivation practices, he says.
Yeah, Killicini's team focused on the trichomes of the plant. These are the little sacs over the plant that contain the active compounds like cannabidiol and tetrahydrocannabinol, THC and CBD. The trichomes are very sensitive and break easily, but by using the CLS beamline, they're able to capture images that normal microscopes don't even come close to. We can view all of the trichomes on a female flower while still intact. That is groundbreaking in itself, Killicini explained.
The trichomes were analyzed during different phases in the plant's development cycle. The research team discovered that the amount and type of trichomes vary heavily during the growth of the plant. This can inform better breeding and cultivation practices, but it will also allow us to select plants based on what we want them to do. It could greatly increase the chemical diversity of the cannabis plant, and we could even discover new applications instead of just trying to maximize THC.
Yeah. Well, cannabis research also helps further research on similar plants like lavender, mint, and tomatoes. And all of that being said, I think, it's really cool that they've got this microscope going right in there, and it can tell us exactly when, we might be able to pinpoint and glean the absolute most from the plant. Science is amazing. Unfortunately, science is a double-edged sword, and this could be used to totally manipulate the plant, and we will lose what was once true cannabis. So
Yeah,
although it's exciting, it's also frightening, right?
Yeah, we've seen that happen many of times.
Yeah, bastardizing the plant is not the way to go.
No. Oh, pardon me. I am drinking my breakfast, and it's making me belch. So I've now put it away for water until we're done. I'm so sorry.
No worries, none whatsoever. I'm enjoying my coffee, and there's my coffee mug.
I'm a ray of fucking sunshine. Beautiful. Heading on to our next story. Now that I'm able to talk better because I put my smoothie to the side. Coming to us from Yahoo News, psychedelic wellness centers close, leaving ketamine patients in 9 states dry and not high.
Yeah, this really surprised me. And it's frightening that they can do this, but the ketamine wellness centers promised a life-changing method to treat suicidal ideation, depression, and PTSD. But its abrupt closure last week has left mental health patients in Arizona and 8 other states without access to drugs or therapy. This is one of the nation's largest chains of ketamine clinics, and it started in Phoenix. It ceased operations with no advance notice to the patients, deadbolting its offices, posting a note on its website, and sending an email.
The company provided scant advice to patients who are in the middle of a drug infusion treatment about how to handle being cut off. It also did not provide any information about how to recover hundreds of thousands of dollars in prepaid costs. Oh my God. The company gave patients a 1-800 number for accessing medical records and told them its parent company is to blame for expanding operations too fast.
Jesus. Due to the inability of the parent company to meet financial commitments of the rapid expansion, we're forced to abruptly close all the clinics and the corporate office, the company said in an email notice to patients. We are ethically and medically required to ensure employees are properly compensated and plan of care is managed appropriately. Unbelievable. Absolutely. That plan, as referenced in an attachment, is simply a list of other ketamine clinics in the states where the company operated, such as Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, Nevada, Minnesota, Texas, Utah, and Washington.
Yeah, well, it's great that they have, that they have given a list of ketamine clinics, and that's wonderful. It saves people from having to search, but they also need to take time and get the money back to the people that have prepaid. And in other words, no substantial plan or managed care for patients like Charmaine Wallstrom, who was scheduled to get her first ketamine infusion on Monday in Arizona. She is angry. She is frustrated. So I'm angry and frustrated, she said on Friday. It's concerning me that their message did not say anything about returning the money that had been paid. And how does it work for people who started infusions and suddenly stopped? Well, they should be fine. She's 64. Everybody's going to have to go to these other clinics and make calls. What concerns me mostly is now that, if they prepaid for, say, 1 or 2 or 5, therapy sessions, they need that money back to continue on.
That's right.
That should have been offered along with this list of other clinics. I get it. They've got to go calling the clinics themselves, but they should be given their money back, because this is not something that's covered. This is something that we pay for out of pocket.
That's right. And having to pay twice and go someplace. That's not right.
So she's from Minnesota. She lives in Arizona in the winter months. She said she chose ketamine, the Ketamine Wellness Center, because it had clinics in both states, making it easy to continue treatment all year long. She was supposed to start Monday, 3 infusions the first week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 more the next week. And she said, I cannot reach a real person. And sadly, she probably won't until... Yeah. They have to go through the legal processes, and what a pain.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, she says an initial round of ketamine infusions can cost about $3,000. Because the drugs are not approved by the FDA, insurance does not cover the cost of most ketamine infusions. Wallstrom paid $125 for a screening process that included psychological and medical exam. She also paid $449 for the first day's ketamine infusion. When she called her case manager on Thursday, she got a message from the manager saying she had left the company a day earlier. There was no additional information.
Wallstrom said she has long suffered from depression and spent months looking into ketamine treatment, which typically involves an initial battery of 6 infusions coupled with therapy and followed by regular infusions depending on need. She said she learned about ketamine online and from talking to people on social media. Your quality of life can be greatly improved by getting ketamine treatment, she said, adding the drug opens up your mind and expands your mind.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, yes. Wallstrom said she filed complaints on Friday with the Arizona Medical Board and the Arizona Attorney General's office. Neither Ketamine Wellness Centers nor its parent company responded to calls from the Arizona Republic, part of USA Today's network. Ketamine clinics are popping up across the United States, with at least a dozen operating in Arizona, and they offer non-FDA approved infusions or injections. They claim to treat pain, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorders, in addition to suicidal thoughts, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, ketamine, popularly known as the party drug Special K, also has a dark reputation as a date rape drug. It was introduced in the early 1960s as an animal anesthetic used by veterinarians. A decade later, hospitals started using it for pain management and to help calm human patients. The United States Drug Enforcement Administration described ketamine as a short-acting anesthetic with hallucinogenic effects. It can distort sights and sounds, induce feelings of calmness and relaxation, and provide relief from pain, immobility, and amnesia, with effects lasting up to 60 minutes.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Research in 2013 suggested ketamine could be used to treat people with mental illness, and studies by the Baylor College of Medicine and Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City found it could alleviate depression symptoms in just hours. So the Food and Drug Administration in 2019 approved a specific type of ketamine for use in a nasal spray for adults who have tried at least 2 other antidepressant medications without success. However, the agency warned in 2022 that ketamine is not FDA approved for treatment of any psychiatric disorder, and it concluded that the FDA has not evaluated the safety, effectiveness, or quality of ketamine-based drugs, and they should only be used in patients whose medical needs cannot be met by an FDA-approved drug.
Yeah, the research on ketamine, it's an anesthetic, so it suppresses. It's not something like you don't take ketamine and go in your head and deal with your problems and, put them away. Ketamine goes in you and it suppresses. So it'll suppress those memories. It'll suppress those feelings. And this is how it's been explained to me by, I've had chats with my psychiatrist. I'm not sure that it's one that I would want to try.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because as we continue reading here, we know that, it's a long article, but you're more than welcome to read it online. It's at Yahoo News. But he basically goes on to say that the chief operating officer said, he's also the lead therapist at Day Trip Health, which is a ketamine clinic, opened in Phoenix 3 weeks ago. He said the failure of ketamine wellness centers could hurt patients. It could put patients in a very vulnerable position, especially if they're already on a plan. It could exacerbate their conditions. Day Trip is built on an East meets West approach, a treatment of a combination of medical science and spiritual healing. The company also assigns patient trip guides to steer them through any hallucinations or out-of-body experiences brought on by the drugs. He says these treatments can be calming and conducive to healing. This article just goes on. In the end, the bottom line is Murphy and Diamond on Thursday asked patients in Arizona for understanding. He says it's our desire to resume therapy under a new business model in many of our markets in the immediate future, they said in the email. Now, I don't know about you, Cindy, but if I had been their patient and they bailed on me in the middle of chaos because they didn't have money, you know what? You're an asshole and I'm out of here. I wouldn't be going back to those patients. Their business is over. I would not be going back to that business. And it's something to be aware of for anybody out there that is considering natural health treatments and therapies. They aren't covered by, any plans or anything like that. And it is buyer beware. So, do your research, but sometimes even doing all your research and everything ahead of time may not be enough, right? Because sometimes shit happens. And this is why I always say it. I raised my kids. Never mind thinking that you only have to have a plan. You need 3 plans, my friend, because life operates on 4. There is your action plan. Then you got a backup plan. In case everything goes awry, you got a contingency plan. And in the end, default, A, B, C, and D. Default is just that's the universe is going to do what the universe is going to do, and you're going to deal.
Anyway, on to our next story. We are heading over back to Microsoft Start. Oregon issues their first license under the psilocybin program.
Yes, Oregon has issued its first license under its new system that offers a controlled use of psilocybin to the public. The Oregon Health Authority announced on Wednesday that it had issued a manufacturer license to Satori Farms PDX LLC, which is owned by Tory Armbrust. Oregon Psilocybin Services, which falls under the Health Authority, began accepting applications for 4 license types in January. More than 220 license and worker permit applications have been submitted to the Oregon Psilocybin Services so far.
Voters in the state in 2020 approved legalizing the therapeutic use of psilocybin mushrooms. Oregon Psilocybin Services says it will take time for all 4 license types, manufacturing, lab, service centers, and facilitators to become licensed and set up operations. Earlier this month, the first students trained in accompanying patients tripping on psychedelic mushrooms graduated during a ceremony held by InnerTrek, a Portland firm. Students must pass a final exam to receive InnerTrek certifications and then take a test administered by the Oregon Health Authority to receive their facilitator licenses.
Oh, very interesting.
Well, that's really cool. It's nice to see places, putting on these courses and helping people get certified. It's the way to do it. The person who's trep setting shouldn't necessarily be the therapist you're working for or working with. Personal opinion.
No, agreed.
Yeah. And with that, it is me scratching stuff out of my eye and medication time. It is time for us to go have our joint session. You are watching Psychedelic and Cannabis Educational News here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast, Roku TV, and at paceradio.net and the cbgtv.com. Back in a couple.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
When you think of the number of unique products developed in the fields, kitchens, and labs at Legacy 420, it's hard to think that one stands out above the rest. But tell that to the thousands of people who have tried this amazing breakthrough product.
This is our Sacred Salve. This is actually our extra strength. It comes in 5 different strengths. It's all natural, all organic. It typically works within 10 to 15 minutes of putting it on. It's good for arthritis, it's good for inflammation, any kind of pain. We're very proud of it.
Sacred Salve, so easy to apply, along with soothing relief. To select a strength that's right for you, come in and talk to your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
Did you know that the Pace Radio Network isn't just a radio network? That's right, because most, but not all of our programming is now done via video and is then podcasted at paceradio.net. So if you want to watch, yes, watch our programming, you'll find us on the Pace Radio Network's Facebook page, plus the show's own page, and you'll find us live on the network's YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can find it all, video and audio, at paceradio.net.
Pace Radio Network, by patients, for patients, and for those who want to know.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com.
Let's share Pace everywhere. That way it can help create peace. People everywhere advocating cannabis education. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network, here at paceradio.net.
And we are back from our medication session. I'm still medicating, actually. And we are live here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast, paceradio.net, and cbgtv.com. And we have 4 more stories coming to you now on the second half of the show. Might as well jump right into them. A little bit of a sad story coming up from the New York Times. Ralph McCullum, father of cannabis research, has died at the age of 92.
Yes. Now, I mean, he lived a very long, full life, but I cried nonetheless. Not even knowing this man, but just his research was just unbelievable. It's a very long article, so we'll kind of gloss over it, Cindy, perhaps. But basically,
yeah, I got a timer on. We get 6.5 minutes for the story.
Okay. Ralph McCullum was a pioneering Israeli chemist who is credited with opening the field of cannabis science. He's the guy who started it all. He identified the structure and the function of the key compounds of cannabis. Unfortunately, he passed away March 9th in his home in Jerusalem, and at the age of 92. His death was confirmed by American Friends of the Hebrew University, and Professor McCullum had been on the university's faculty since 1966.
The professor's groundbreaking work with cannabis began in the early 1960s, just before the use of cannabis and other drugs exploded in countries around the world, bringing seismic changes to popular culture while also kicking off decades-long battles about health effects and in enforcement. His research earned him the unofficial title, the father of cannabis research. In the beginning, the professor's fascination with cannabis was not culture, but scientific, driven by fascination with the chemical structure of plants and other natural products.
Yes, at the time, he found the science of cannabis to be sorely lacking, which it was. Morphine had been isolated from opium in the early 19th century, Professor McCullum had said in a 2014 interview with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who is the chief medical correspondent for CNN. Cocaine had been isolated from the cocoa leaves in the mid-19th century, and here we are in the mid-20th century, and yet the chemistry of cannabis was not known. So it looked like an interesting project. As a result, Professor McCollum and his team at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel, just south of Tel Aviv, began to break down the chemical structures of THC, the psychoactive compound in cannabis, to assess how it did what it did, namely make users high. He continued this research for decades at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Yeah, he and his team were also able to eliminate the structure effects of other cannabinoids, including CBD, which is the non-psychoactive component of the plant that has fueled a marketing craze in recent years because of its effectiveness in treating a variety of ailments, including anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain. In his research at the Hebrew University, Professor McCollum synthesized many cannabinoid compounds that helped other scientists discover cannabinoid receptors in the brain. Yossi Tam, a professor at the Hebrew University and a longtime colleague, said that in a phone interview.
Yes, Professor McCollum also did he did the groundbreaking research on the body's natural endocannabinoid system, which we hear so much of, including the discovery of anandamide, which is one of the main endocannabinoids. So endocannabinoid chemicals, similar to those found in cannabis, help to regulate a wide range of bodily functions, including learning and memory, sleep, immune responses, and appetite. Most of the human and scientific knowledge about cannabis was accumulated thanks to Professor McCollum. Asher Cohen says, she's the current president of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She said that in a statement, he paved the way for groundbreaking studies and initiated scientific cooperation between researchers around the world. McCollum was a sharp-minded and charismatic pioneer.
This is not to say that there was much institutional hunger for such research in those pre-hippie days. When we started work many years ago, there was essentially no interest in cannabinoids, Professor McCollum said in a 2019 video interview. When he applied for a grant from the National When he applied for a grant from the National Institutes of Health in the United States in the 1960s, he said the agency responded, "When you have something more relevant to the U.S., contact us. Cannabis is not of interest. It's used sometimes in Mexico, but not in the U.S." The NIH would ultimately support his research for more than 40 years. He added, that changed fast. Raphael McCollum was born November 5th, 1930, into a Jewish family in Sofia, Bulgaria. His father was a prominent Austrian-born physician, and his mother had studied in Berlin and encouraged a broad education in many languages.
Yeah. After Bulgaria's pro-German government passed a number of extreme anti-Semitic laws during the World War II, my parents believed that our family would be safer in small villages in the Balkans that badly needed physicians, says Professor McCollum. Actually, he didn't say it. He wrote it in retrospective of his life and work, which was published in the Annual Review of Pharmacology and Toxicology in January. He says, I recall my daily trips to the common village pump to bring home pails of water for our needs, and I read the few available books by sitting close to candle in the evening. His father was sent to a concentration camp in 1944, but had survived, and in 1949, the family emigrated to Israel, where Professor McCollum studied at the Hebrew University, earning a master's degree in biochemistry. He was conscripted in 1953 and spent about 2 years working in an Israeli Army medical research unit.
Yeah, we learned a bit more about his history here. After taking an academic post on the Weizmann Institute in the early 60s, he began to read about the pharmacology of cannabis. I was surprised to note that an active compound had apparently never been isolated in pure form, and its structure was only partially known, he wrote. Even the structure of a major crystalline component, CBD, which had been isolated more than 2 decades previously, was not fully elucidated. Because cannabis was illegal in Israel, Professor McCollum had to develop contacts within law enforcement to procure a supply for his studies. I didn't have a car at the time, he told CNN. I was in the bus carrying 5 kilos of hashish. People were just saying, it's kind of a strange smell. We tested that on a few volunteers, including ourselves.
Back in the lab, he and a colleague, Yel Gayoni, extracted the hashish, and by repeated column chromatography, they were able to isolate probably about 10 compounds, and most of them unknown. He elucidated their structures. Professor McCullum wrote in the annual review. Over the course of Professor McCullum's career, Professor Tam said he was a champion of research into the potential medical benefits of cannabis. In 1980, he conducted clinical research in Brazil using CBD to treat people with epilepsy. After a few months, Professor Tam said none of the people in the study reported seizures.
That's amazing.
It really is. When Dr. Gupta of CNN referred to Professor McCullum, then in his 80s, as the grandfather of cannabis, Professor McCullum smiled and said, "Well, I am a grandfather. Okay, I have 7 grandchildren. In addition to them, he is survived by his wife, Dahlia McCullum, his son, Roy, and his daughters, Daphna Golan and Hadis McCullum." In the 2019 video interview, Professor McCullum expressed his satisfaction with the contributions to science by quoting a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke titled "Widening Circles."
Yeah, so he did a lot for cannabis. Born in the 1930s, and wow.
Well, he discovered the endocannabinoid system, and because of that, while studying the compound of THC, the endocannabinoid system was discovered in or around the mid to late 80s. And it was because of his research. And because of that, many of us, myself included, were able to say, you know what? This is a natural substance. This is what I need to help me. And I managed to transpose from that person who was completely against the use of cannabis to someone who wanted to know more and understand more and begin using the compound. And I think we're finding this about a lot of different natural substances, but he was the grandfather there. And I, for one, like many others, am very, very grateful for his research and his study and his dedication to the science.
Okay. I hate to cut you short, but we are moving on to the next story. Coming to us, we are at The Guardian, and psychedelic brew ayahuasca's profound impact revealed in brain scans.
So this study gives the most advanced picture yet of DMT's compound effects on advanced functions, such as imagination. The brew is so potent that practitioners report not only powerful hallucinations, but near-death experiences. There's contact with higher dimensional beings and life-transforming voyages through alternative realities, often before throwing up or having trouble at the other end.
Now, scientists have gleaned deep insights of their own by monitoring the brain on DMT, the psychedelic compound found in the Psychorita viridis. Ooh, I did my best. The flowering shrub that is mashed up and boiled in the Amazon drink ayahuasca. And of course, we're talking about the NN-DMT, the plant-based DMT, not the frog-based DMT. There are two. The recordings reveal a profound impact across the brain, particularly in the areas that are highly evolved in humans and instrumental in planning, language, memory, complex decision-making, and imagination. The regions from which we conjure reality become hyperconnected with communication, more chaotic, fluid, and flexible.
At the dose we use, it is incredibly potent, said Robin Harris, a professor of neurology and psychiatry at the University of California, San Francisco. People describe leaving this world and breaking through into another that is incredibly immersive and richly complex, sometimes being populated by other beings that they feel might hold special power over them, like gods. He added, "What we have seen is that DMT breaks down the basic networks of the brain, causing them to become less distinct from each other. We also see the major rhythms of the brain that serve a largely inhibitory, constraining function. Break down, and in concert, brain activity becomes more entropic or information-rich."
Humans have sought the altered states. Humans have sought the altered states brought on by ayahuasca for at least 1,000 years. In 2019, the archaeological dig of a Bolivian cave unearthed a leather pouch fashioned from 3 fox snouts. Analysts of the bag's interior revealed traces of DMT, cocaine, probably from a coca leaf, and other psychoactive substances. The bag, dated from AD 900 to 1170, was wrapped in a bundle with a little llama bone spatulas, wooden snuffing tablets, and a brightly colored headband. The brew is typically made by boiling a giant vine. I'm not even going to try a capi. I know the last part of it, with the leaves from the shrub that the DMT comes from. Its name comes from the Quechua language spoken by many indigenous groups in the Andes, with aya meaning soul, ancestors or dead people, and huasca meaning vine or rope. Translations then vary from the spirituality enigmatic vine of the soul to the somewhat less inviting rope of death.
For the latest study, Chris Timmerman, head of DMT research at the Imperial College London, recruited 20 healthy volunteers who received a 20 milligram injection of DMT and a placebo on separate visits to the lab. All were screened to ensure they were physically and mentally suitable for the study. Using the electroencephalography, the EEG, and functional magnetic resonance imaging, which is fMRI, the scientists recorded the participants' brain activity before, during, and after the drug took hold. Volunteers gave updates throughout on how intense the experience felt. None vomited, as the emetic is another ingredient in ayahuasca. The results published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences provide the most advanced picture yet of the human brain on psychedelics. Now, the recordings show how the brain's normal hierarchical or organization breaks down. The electrical activity becomes anarchic, and connectivity between the regions soars, particularly those handling higher levels or functions such as imagination, which evolved most recently in humans. Now, the stronger the intensity of the experience, the more hyper-connected those brain areas are, said Timmerman. Now, this ability to make brain activity more fluid and flexible is thought to underpin not only the profound psychedelic experience, but the promising results from earlier clinical trial patients who were given DMT in combination with psychotherapy to treat depression. DMT is short acting, so it's a very flexible tool compared with psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, and LSD, which can last for 6 to 10 hours, said Timmerman. Now, it appears that I have lost my co-host, and as such, I've also lost the ability to share my screen. So if you will allow me a moment, I will see about getting my screen on there so we can watch the article. Here's the article. There we go. And hopefully Cindy, my co-host, makes it back. While the scans and the EEGs provide an unprecedented view of the brain on DMT, researchers believe that there is more to learn. They suspect that while the newer and more evolved aspects of the brain dysregulate under DMT, older systems in the brain may be disinhibited. A similar kind of things happens in dreaming. Now, this is just the beginning in cracking the question of how DMT works to alter consciousness so dramatically. Really interesting articles. Hopefully Cindy will make it back. In the meantime, I think we will just move on to our next story. Let me see if I can find Cindy. I'm just going to send this to her, see if we can't get Cindy back here ASAP. And yeah, because it's just not the same without a co-host. I will carry on as we go and see if we can do that. Anyway, let's move on. Sorry, guys. Welcome to live television, right? Let's go on. Our next story comes from Science Daily. And in the Science Daily, scientists' advanced brain imaging studies hints at how DMT psychedelic alters the perception of reality. So we were just looking at ayahuasca in that sense, and scientists have gleaned new insights into how these psychedelics alter the conscious experience via their action on the brain activity. Right? How cool. In a study at Imperial College London, detailed brain imaging data from 20 healthy volunteers revealed how the potent psychedelic compound DMT alters the brain function. During the immersive DMT experience, there was also increased connectivity across the brain with more communication between different areas and systems. The changes to brain activity were most prominent in areas linked with higher level functionings and imagination. This sounds very much like the article we just finished reading, right? So why don't we just skip down and through, and the bottom line is their results revealed that when a volunteer was on DMT, there was a marked dysregulation in some of the brain rhythms that would ordinarily be dominant. So the brain switches its mode of functioning to something altogether more anarchic, which is fascinating.
Are we still on the same story?
Actually, we had 2 in a row that were exactly the same, practically, almost word for word. So we have potential plagiarism.
Okay, but which story are we on?
Sorry, we're on advanced brain imaging study.
Thank you. Where in the story are we?
At the end.
Okay.
Last 2 paragraphs. I'll let you finish them up while I have a sip of coffee. How's that?
Okay, so which I just got in here, so I'm trying to figure out where you ended.
Okay, so at the very end, the last 2 paragraphs, the Imperial team.
Oh, the Imperial team is now exploring how to prolong the peak of the psychedelic experience through continuous infusion with DMT. And some are also advising on commercially run trial to assess DMT for patients with depression. But the stories are kind of different. Weren't we talking about ayahuasca last time? And this time it seems like we're talking about straight DMT.
Now, yeah, and perhaps because I don't understand enough about them, this is almost word for word. Like volunteers received a dose of DMT, 20 milligrams.
Yes, but I mean, that's different than taking ayahuasca.
But is ayahuasca not a form of DMT?
No, DMT is part of ayahuasca.
Okay. Now, This being word for word, practically exactly the same article. I don't have the other one open now, so I can't verify.
Well, no, but I mean, like when they run a lot of these studies, they'll use a lot of the same things. It's the same as like they're going to run 2 studies on psilocybin up here, but when they report them, a lot of the wording is going to be the same. But yeah, they're talking about an Imperial College in London. And I think the other one was in London. I think what they're doing is DMT is a potent psychedelic found naturally in certain plants. It occurs in trace amounts in the human body, and it is a part of the compound in ayahuasca. Yeah, of course, I wasn't here. I was rebooting my computer because it decided it needed to shut down.
Oh, our computer's fun. All these wonderful little technical bugs, eh? But yeah, for all intent purposes, this is just a rewrite. They may have used the same content, but this is a rewrite of the previous article, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm not seeing them talk a lot about ayahuasca. I'd have to read the article.
Okay. But basically, they just say the same thing, that researchers highlight that while their study is not the first to image the brain under the influence of psychedelics or the first to show signatures of the brain activity linked to psychedelics, it is the first to combine imaging techniques to study the brain during a highly immersive psychedelic experience. And they explain the work provides further evidence of how DMT and psychedelics are generally exert their effects by disrupting high-level brain systems, right?
Mm.
And yeah, so basically, and from what I can tell, actually, yeah, this is just another take on the same study but there's a lot of studies being done on DMT for sure. And I think
yes, I'm going to reiterate though, that the last study was done on ayahuasca.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on to the next story?
Yeah, I was just waiting for you to do this.
I forgot I had the board.
on to the last story coming to us from Fox News. Brazil to rule whether businesses can plant cannabis, potentially opening passage to legal cultivation.
A Brazilian appeals court has agreed to rule on whether companies and farmers can plant cannabis in the country, which could actually open the door to legal cultivation for medicinal and industrial purposes after legislative efforts stalled in recent years.
The decision by the Superior Court of Justice, the STJ, Brazil's top appeals court for non-constitutional matters, was made public on March 14th and established its jurisdiction for a nationwide precedent regarding the import of seeds and planting of cannabis. Now, all pending cases regarding permission to plant cannabis in the country will be frozen until the STJ makes a final and binding decision to lawyers following the case said.
Yeah, Brazil allows the sale and production of cannabis products, but companies must import the key ingredients. The court's final ruling on cannabis, expected within the next year, could make it a trailblazer on a topic spurned by many of Brazil's conservative-leaning Congress, like Supreme Court's 2011 ruling paving the way for same-sex marriage. Brazil has banned growing cannabis sativa, the plant that makes hemp and cannabis. Researchers and cannabis firms have argued that Brazil's tropical climate is ideally suited to make it a leading global supplier.
Advocates argue the ban on growing domestically raises the final cost of medicines to consumers who must rely on imports. Congress is a little afraid to decide on the cannabis issue, and it is a controversial one, said author Arsufi, a lawyer representing biotech startup DNA Solutions, Biotechnologia, in the case before the STJ. So that has put off a decision, and given the number of lawsuits, the judiciary ends up having to settle the issue.
Yeah. DNA has brought a civil lawsuit arguing for the right to import seeds and plant cannabis with higher levels of cannabinoids, such as cannabidiol, and less THC, a psychoactive component in the plant. Hemp, which has less than 0.3% THC and far more CBD, has been touted by some advocates as beneficial for treating health conditions such as childhood epilepsy. Joe Bacelar, chief executive of pharmaceutical firm VerdMed, said courts may now lead the way on cannabis policy as they did in Canada. However, Bacelar said there were risks associated with STJ ruling on such a complex matter, which he said would be best settled by a bill in Congress to legalize hemp plantations.
Victor Miranda, a lawyer, said the STJ's decision to set precedent on the matter was consistent with Brazilian jurisprudence and gave no clear sign of how it would ultimately rule on the merits of the case. It is hard to speculate on the result, Miranda said, but STJ ruling is a sign that the court is worried about in this matter.
Well, so they may not be growing anytime soon. That's sad.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it is a reality. We
have that happening in our own country. We still have 2 provinces that don't allow growing of your own cannabis. So it's kind of like going to be one of the last things that I think ends up regulated properly, the growing of our own.
But I do think, and I'm sure you agree with me, over the course of the next decade, I think a lot of previously labeled evil psychedelics are going to be recognized as definite health benefits.
That's happening before we even have cannabis under control legally. And when we see that happening in countries that still want nothing to do with legal cannabis, but yet they're opening their arms to psychedelics, Australia being the one that comes to my mind, first off. So psychedelics are, and most psychedelics are only criminalized in the last 30 years. There is iboga was criminalized, I think, 3.5 years ago. So a lot of these psychedelics, they're newly criminalized, and they're only criminalized because the powers that be don't know how to make money from them yet.
I was going to say, notably, most of these molecules, components, chemicals, plants, they have been used for centuries upon centuries by medicine men and women in tribal situations right through until early medicine and early pharmacology of our 18th century, 19th century pharmacists. With that being said, yeah, they just can't isolate what it is about this plant that works. But medicine men and women knew it was a combination of mind, body, spirit, physical.
Well, it's set in settings. So which is getting your mind and your body and your spirit all ready to take it and being in the right mindset. And the government doesn't get that, or the powers that be, or big pharma. They don't get that. They think that they should be able to take this plant and figure out what's helping the humans or the pets or and then they should be able to do something so they can reproduce it in a lab. And I understand why they think that. We've had some scientists come along that wanted to save the frogs, say for 5-MeO DMT. There was a vegan scientist that came along. When people went out and harvested these frogs, the frogs got hurt. It doesn't hurt to harvest the stuff from the frog, but in catching them, you can hurt the frogs if you're doing it improperly. So what he wanted to do was create the compounds so people would stop going out chasing the frogs and killing them. Right? So he created the compound and he shared it with the world. He wrote a book on it, and he's got the recipe in the book. Anybody can buy the book and follow the recipe and make their own 5-MeO DMT.
There you go.
So, and that's kind of the way to do it. And the government sees stuff like that and they go, ooh, if we don't share that with anybody, we can make money.
Yeah, so there's always a hidden agenda. And quite frankly, our governments do not serve the people anymore, except for the people in government.
Yeah.
Society has changed, and hopefully one day my grandchildren, your grandchildren, will take back our countries.
Yeah.
Right?
With any
and our rights.
But with that being said, we are at the end of our show. We have gone through all 8 stories. So from the Legacy420.com news desk, that is our news for today. We hope you found it educational and informative. Thank you. Thank you to Legacy 420, Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, and to our viewers. Catch our next broadcast with Reverend Kelly and Al on Monday. Actually, I don't know the date off the top of my head.
On Monday it'll be me and Al.
It'll be Irene and Al. Kelly will be off as she is running this weekend with the Can Expo, of course. So have fun at the Can Expo if you're going, and we'll see you next week. And awesome. You have fun on Monday with Al.
Yes, be happy, be healthy, stay strong, people. Ciao for now.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. CBGTV, broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.